Picture the last one. You don't know what they looked like exactly. Nobody does. But picture them anyway, standing at the edge of something, looking out. They had a fire. They had people they loved. They had been doing this, surviving, making things, burying their dead, for 400,000 years. You have been doing it for 40,000. They were here 10 times longer than we have been. And they are gone. And we are why. This is the story of the other humans, the ones who were here first. The ones who are still, in a way you are about to understand, inside you right now. Everything you think you know about Neanderthals is wrong. The image in your head, the hunched, slack-jawed brute dragging a club, came from a single skeleton found in France in 1908. The man had severe arthritis. His spine was curved from disease. Scientists looked at his bent posture and drew a species from it. It took 50 years to correct the mistake. By then the image was in every textbook you ever read, so let's replace it. The Neanderthal standing in front of you is stocky, built for cold. Short limbs, wide chest, a barrel ribcage that pulls in more oxygen per breath than yours does. Their body is not a lesser version of your body. It is a different solution to a different problem. They were optimized for Ice Age Europe, the way a snow leopard is optimized for altitude. You would not have survived their world without fire and clothing. They were born into it. Their brain was, on average, slightly larger than yours. Not smarter necessarily, that debate is ongoing, but the story of the stupid Neanderthal who lost to clever Homo sapiens. The evidence does not support it. They lived in groups of 10 to 30. They had something close enough to language that the distinction barely matters. The hyoid bone, which makes complex speech possible, has been found in Neanderthal remains, and it is identical to yours. They knew their landscape the way you know your own neighborhood, except their neighborhood was a continent, and they had been learning it for hundreds of thousands of years. Archaeologists have traced the same Neanderthal hunting routes used across generations, passed down like a family skill, like something you teach your children because your parents taught you. Here is the part that should make you uncomfortable. In 2018, researchers confirmed that the oldest cave paintings in Europe were not made by us. 3 caves in Spain, red ochre on the walls, geometric shapes, and handprints. Someone pressed their hand against stone and blew pigment around it, leaving a negative image of their fingers in the dark. These were made at least 20,000 years before Homo sapiens arrived in Europe. You are not looking at your ancestors' art, you are looking at theirs. They painted their bodies with black manganese pigment. They wore eagle talons and pierced shells as jewelry. They collected things that were beautiful and had no survival value, which means they understood beauty, which means something was happening inside them that we usually reserve the word human for. They used medicine. Analysis of Neanderthal dental tartar, the plaque fossilized on their teeth, found traces of yarrow and chamomile, plants that taste bitter, plants with no nutritional value, plants you wouldn't eat by accident. They were using them deliberately for something. Pain relief, digestion. We don't know exactly, but they knew those plants did something. They remembered it, they passed it on, and they buried their dead. At Shanidar cave in Iraq, a Neanderthal was found placed with apparent deliberateness. Knees drawn up, head resting. Pollen around the body may have been from flowers placed there or may have blown in. Scientists still argue. But at La Ferrassie in France, 8 Neanderthals were arranged in a deliberate pattern. An infant, several adults, positioned. At Kibara Cave in Israel, a burial contained the full skeleton, except the skull, which was removed after death. Deliberately. Think about what that requires. Someone died. People who loved them came back. They performed a ritual with the body. They had a belief, or something close enough to a belief that the distinction barely matters, about what death means, about what the dead deserve. These are not the actions of an animal running on instinct. These are the actions of a mind that knows it will die, that wonders what happens next, that decides the dead should not be left alone. That is not so different from you. Around 45,000 years ago, Homo sapiens entered Europe. We had come out of Africa, moved through the Middle East, and now we were pushing into territory that Neanderthals had occupied for hundreds of thousands of years. Their territory, their hunting grounds, their landscape. What happened next is the central mystery of human prehistory. We know the outcome. Within roughly 5,000 years, a blink of time in evolutionary terms, Neanderthals were gone. The last known populations were holding on at the southern tip of Spain, at a site called Gorham's Cave in Gibraltar, as recently as 28,000 years ago. Then nothing. What we don't know is exactly why. The old story was simple. We were smarter, so we won. We outcompeted them for food, outfought them in the hunt, and they simply couldn't keep up. But that story has problems. Neanderthals had survived every climate shift, every predator, every ice advance for 400,000 years. They weren't fragile. Something more specific happened. The current leading theories aren't comfortable ones. We may have brought diseases they had no immunity to. The same dynamic that would devastate indigenous populations when Europeans arrived in the Americas tens of thousands of years later. We may have been marginally more efficient hunters, not dramatically smarter, just slightly better at extracting calories from the same landscape. In a world with no margin for error, slightly better is enough. Over generations, their population declined, slowly, then terminally, and some researchers have raised a darker possibility: direct violence. There is evidence of Neanderthal bones with cut marks made by human tools at several sites. Whether this represents cannibalism, conflict, or something else, we don't know, but the marks are there. The most likely answer is that no single cause wiped them out. It was the accumulation: disease, competition, climate stress, declining birth rates, increasingly fragmented populations that couldn't sustain genetic diversity. Death by 1,000 cuts, across 1,000 years. Here is the thing that changes everything. They didn't simply disappear. Before they did, we had children with them. In 2010, geneticist Svante Pääbo and his team at the Max Planck Institute sequenced the Neanderthal genome from a 40,000-year-old bone fragment. What they found reshaped our understanding of human history. If you are of non-African descent, between 1% and 4% of your DNA is Neanderthal, not metaphorically, literally. You carry genetic sequences that came from Neanderthal individuals who had children with Homo sapiens, whose descendants survived, whose line eventually led to you. And that DNA is not inert. It does things. Some Neanderthal gene variants affect how your immune system responds to infection. They were shaped by hundreds of thousands of years in Europe. Your immune system inherited some of their hard-won adaptations to that environment. Other Neanderthal variants are associated with pain sensitivity, blood clotting, and how your skin responds to UV light. The slightly thicker keratin in some people's skin traces back to Neanderthal sequences. There are also Neanderthal variants associated with increased risk of depression, blood clotting disorders, and type 2 diabetes, adaptations that may have helped survival in the Ice Age, but carry costs in a modern environment. You are not fully Homo sapiens. You are the product of a mixing that happened in the cold of Europe 40,000 years ago, when two kinds of human met, and whatever else happened between them also made families. We used to tell a story about Neanderthals that made us feel good. We were smarter. We won. Evolution chose us because we deserved to be chosen. But the evidence doesn't support a story that clean. What it shows instead is a people who survived everything the world threw at them for nearly 500,000 years. Who painted in the dark. Who buried their dead. Who pressed their hands against cave walls and left a mark that said, "I was here." And then we arrived, and within a few thousand years, they were gone. The last Neanderthals lived in Gibraltar, at the edge of a continent, looking out at water they couldn't cross, while a world that had been theirs was slowly filled with something new. We don't know what the end looked like. We don't know if there was a last group, a last family, a last individual. We don't know if they knew they were disappearing, or if they simply lived until there weren't enough of them left to go on. What we know is that they're not entirely gone. They're in the 1 to 4% of your genome that doesn't belong to Homo sapiens. They're in your immune response and your skin, a heaviness for no reason, a weight that doesn't match the day. You've called it a bad mood. Maybe a doctor called it something clinical. Either way, you were taught it meant something was wrong with you. It might not be. Some of the genetic variants we inherited from Neanderthals are linked to depression. Nobody knows why those sequences survived 40,000 years instead of fading out. One theory, in an ice age, a heavier mind kept someone alive through a winter that killed the lighter hearts around them. What looks like a flaw now may have been armor then. So the next time that weight shows up, you don't have to call it broken. You can call it inherited. You didn't replace them. You absorbed them. And the next time you feel that weight, it has a name and a face and 400,000 years behind it.